Now, from Ezra 7 on, now it moves to rebuilding the temple. Now, or the city. Now, how do we know that 457 is the right date, that that's when Jerusalem was to be rebuilt? Are we aware that Esther takes place between Ezra chapter 6 and Ezra chapter 7? There's actually 59 years that takes place between Ezra chapter 6 and Ezra chapter 7. That's a lot of years in between building the temple and rebuilding Jerusalem. Now, why is 457? Why do we know that's the right date? Ezra 7, 12 and 13, Artaxerxes, the king, to Ezra, the priest, teach the law of God of heaven, greetings. Now, I decree to any of the Israelites in my kingdom, including the priests and the Levites, who volunteer to go to Jerusalem with you, may go. Now, this doesn't have the same language. It's not talking about the house of God. Now, the language is about going to Jerusalem. Deliver to the God of Jerusalem all of the articles entrusted to you for the worship of the temple of your God, and anything else needed for the temple of your God that you are responsible to supply. You may provide from all the royal treasury. I cannot believe that the king gave him access to the royal treasury. Whatever you need, you got access to my bank account. How many times does that happen? Because the Lord said, all the gold and silver in the world is mine, and I will bless this by my spirit, he says. And so who stirred him up here to do this, to give him full access to the treasury? With this money, be sure to buy bulls and rams and male lambs, together grain, drink offerings, sacrifice them on the altar of the temple of your God in Jerusalem, and you and your fellow Israelites may then do whatever seems best with the rest of the silver and gold in accordance with your God. Not only did he say, you have the full treasury, but he said, whatever seems good to you, go ahead. Who would like access to a king's treasury like that? Whatever seems good to you, build the house of God, and after that, do whatever you want with it. And you, Ezra, in accordance with the wisdom of the Lord your God, which you possess, appoint magistrates and judges to administer justice to all the people of Trans-Euphrates. This is huge. The king is giving him permission to reestablish the authority and the headship of Jerusalem, so that there's magistrates and governors, which is going to be appointed. Nehemiah is going to be appointed a governor in Jerusalem by the heads because of this order, which is often confused as the decree to rebuild Jerusalem. All who know the laws of your God, and you are to teach any who do not know them. Whoever does not obey the law or your God and the law of the king must surely be punished by death, banishment, confiscation of property, and imprisonment. So not only do you have authority to rebuild Jerusalem and to make magistrates and governors, but now you have the authority to administer the law also. Not only the law of the king, but also your own laws, the laws of your God and the laws of the Bible. And a proclamation was then issued throughout Judea and Jerusalem to all the exiles to assemble in Jerusalem, and anyone who failed to appear within 3 days would forfeit his property. So Jerusalem was not being filled with thousands and thousands of people. The heads of the families were coming back to begin to reestablish Jerusalem. And if you were not there, you didn't get your property back. The property that was given to your families back before the exile. This is clearly talking about the decree to rebuild Jerusalem. In accordance with the decision of the officials and the elders, and would himself be expelled from the assembly of the exiles. Within 3 days, all the men of the Judea and Benjamin had gathered in Jerusalem. 457. And this still, again, all takes place. So these are some serious reasons why we know that 457 is the right date. Now, of course, Ezra did not hire any builders. He didn't actually start to rebuild Jerusalem. And Nehemiah got word several years later that nothing was happening in Jerusalem, that it was still burnt down. The walls were destroyed. He asked his friends, and he wept. It bothered him deeply. And again, we have another example of God stirring somebody's heart to go and finish a work that he had started. So what did he do? He prayed. He went before the king, and the king said to him, What is it you want? I mean, you're distraught. I can tell you're depressed. What is it you want? He said, I pray that the God of heaven... So he prayed. He said a silent prayer, and then I answered the king. If it please the king, if your servant has found favor in your sight, let him send me to the city in Jerusalem where I may, where my ancestors are buried, so that I can rebuild the city. And may I have letters to the governors of Trans-Euphrates, so they will provide me with safe conduct during my travel. He's not asking for a decree to rebuild Jerusalem. He's asking for permission to be able to travel there safely. Although a lot of people think that the decree to rebuild Jerusalem was given in 444. And he says, will you give me another letter? A letter to your royal park, or the timber mill, if you will, so they will give me beams so that I can make gates. Again, no decree. He just gave him a letter and said, yeah, you can have some timber and you can have a good trip there. Moreover, from the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when I was appointed to be the governor of the land, in the land of Judea, until the 32nd year, 12 years, neither I nor my brothers ate any food that were allotted to the governors. So Nehemiah was appointed governor in Jerusalem, and he was governor there for 12 years before he left and went back to the king. And you, Ezra, in accordance with the wisdom of your God, which you possess, appoint magistrates and judges, right? This is exactly what happened with Nehemiah. It's an extension of the decree that was set forth in 457. Does that make sense? So the wall was completed on the 25th of Elul. In 42 days it took them to complete the wall. Yeah, thank you. 52 days it took them to complete the wall. What an amazing work that was. And it lays it out in Nehemiah 4:44. Now, a lot of the Jews say that that was the year, a lot of other people also say that that was the year when God decreed to rebuild Jerusalem. But we have seen absolutely no evidence of that. As a matter of fact, in Nehemiah 7:4, it says, now the city was large and spacious, but there were few people in it, and the houses had not been rebuilt yet. This is not talking about that this is the time when Jerusalem was rebuilt. But while all of this was going on, now we're at the end of Nehemiah. Nehemiah has come in, he's rebuilt the city, he feels like he's got them on the right path. You know, he made a big deal about breaking Sabbath and keeping the ceremonial stuff, and you know, he really did his work. And then he went home, back to the king, and there was some other shenanigans that were going on there that he was very disappointed with. And he said, but while all of this was going on, the other shenanigans, I was not in Jerusalem. For in the 32nd year of Artaxerxes, king of Babylon, I had returned to the king. And sometime later, I had asked his permission to come back to Jerusalem. So we're talking at least 432. The building of Jerusalem was still going on, according to the book of Nehemiah, at probably 425, because he says several years after I returned to continue the work. So just in the book of Nehemiah, we can see that it went well past, really close to 408.